Hello and welcome to the Recursive podcast. Our next guest has always believed in the idea that space is closer than we think. Raycho Raychev is the co-founder of one of the fastest growing space tech companies in Europe, EnduroSat. The company builds nanosatellites and it offers shared satellite missions that gives nations, companies, and even universities access to space. He had also created a leadership and space education program for space engineers in Bulgaria called Space Challenges. Raycho Raychev, welcome to the Recursive podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It has been a very interesting journey of getting myself prepared for this interview. I have some interesting quotes that I would like to start with. My favorite one from you is, making a space startup is like being a baby again. You wake up at 5 a.m. and you just cry. Why did you end up creating a startup that it feels like waking up at 5 a.m. and just crying?
Yeah, to be honest, this is not my quotation. I just used it. I saw it as a description of generally creating startups, but I twisted a little bit with a space flavor in it.
Yeah, but why did you decide to create a space startup? Everyone is like trying to create a startup, and you're making your life way more hard than.
At the moment that, in the moments that when we started the company, I didn't know what I'm getting into. So I was as optimistic as any other founder in any other industry. And to be honest, I don't know if starting a space startup is worse or more difficult. And as time went, as we developed the company, we understood that a lot of things that we didn't account for in terms of risks, tough, difficult decisions, and especially complexity of technology and sector, surprised us a lot.
I have a favorite quote by a friend of mine who says, not knowing can be a very good superpower because sometimes you don't get to the limitations that the environment has.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Not knowing is blessing, basically. If you ask me, with my current experience, would I start in an attic apartment a space program in Bulgaria? Probably the answer would be no. If you have a time machine and you return me on the same spot when we were thinking and conceptualizing about EnduroSat, but having in mind all the context and the experience that we earned in the industry by fighting every day, probably due to the experience, you have a bigger amount of fear factor playing in your decisions.
You have started your company with a bank loan. How courageous is that? With a bank loan. You took money from the bank to fund the first few months.
Yeah, it's this was one of the hardest moments in my life because I wanted to build spacecraft ever since I'm a child. I don't remember if there was a wow moment that turned me into this direction. Maybe there was, but I don't remember the exact moment. And when I decided to go to actually try it, it was really difficult for two reasons. First, I didn't have any financial backup. And secondly, to be fully invested in the startup, I had to leave a really good job. And it was the first 6 months of running the company were probably the most difficult ones. Because you are uncertain, you are still not certain about your own capabilities. Can you develop and design this thing to actually work out? You have to convince the first people to come on board, which I was grateful that they decided and jumped immediately. And then you have to go and search for investors, which in our case was a disaster management, because we didn't know, especially myself, I didn't know how to pitch, how to present the project. And also in our region, since there was absolutely zero other alternative space programs at that moment of time, going to someone's office and telling him, hey, I'm Raycho, I'm going to build a space company, was borderline crazy. And we had a situation where a guy literally called the security guys to go walk me out of the office because he literally thought that I'm a crazy person.
Have you met this guy again?
Not really physically. I didn't meet him, but I'm pretty sure that now he's more confident that I'm not as crazy as I looked maybe 6 years ago.
Amazing. A word that pops to my mind that you used in the conversation that I was listening to, so I can get myself prepared, is a lunatic.
Yeah. No, but you can imagine a guy with a really strange looking, I would say, guy with my thick Balkan accent telling I'm going to build a world-class space program and actually we're going to democratize access to space. I would have my own doubts if I meet me in 6 years ago.
Yeah. The joke about lunatic is in Bulgarian, luna means a moon. Yeah. So it's like space-related object. So lunatic, it's just a pun. Your signature phrase is space is closer than you think. And it's definitely seems so. For just 6 years, you made all of this possible with the team, of course. What made it possible for you to pursue the business venture in space? I mean, you were saying that it was hard, and going back, you will definitely have a second guess of your idea to start this. But space challenges started way before that, and you used it as a base for the first people to join you. So it happened.
I probably believe more than usual that space is the inevitable future of us as a species if we don't do something excessively stupid on the ground, of course, before that. And so I thought that if more people have proper, meaningful access to space in any shape or form, our society would benefit from it on a much larger scale. And everything that we have done in the last 11 years, first starting with the educational program, was to convince young people with much more talents and brains than I have, and that space is actually like every other industry, and as long as you can apply your know-how and know the specificity of the environment you are getting into, the context of the industry that you're getting into, it's completely possible and plausible that you're going to have a tremendous success and build something meaningful. And with the educational program, the idea of space is closer was, can we make sure that leading experts from the field of space science and technology actually engage with very smart people from our region and demonstrate exactly this message, that you should not be afraid to fail if you pursue something that is of a better meaning and better value, potential outcome. And from one side and from the other side, that you should never limit yourself thinking automatically, well, this is not for me because the industry is too far, sounds like too far-fetched, or we don't have it in our region. You should not self-deprive yourself of the opportunity to develop in the field that you are really good at. So this was the first step of how do we make space closer, where we just literally bring physically experts from around the planet to share their experience and expertise with us. We learn from them. We see where the sector is right now, and then we leverage the fact that sometimes not having any whatsoever well-built infrastructure in a given sector gives you the privilege to leapfrog and to jump immediately into the domains that are current trends and currently relevant to the sector. So this is what we did, and this is how the idea grew towards EnduroSat, towards the idea, well, if we now understand a little bit better the environment of space, the context of the space industry, and where this industry is going, thanks to the amazing efforts and the privilege of hosting those more than 100 leading experts in a duration of 6-7 years in Bulgaria from the space sector, then why don't we actually engage even further? And now that we know where the trends are and where we could really bring immense value, try to do it on a technology level. And technology level was basically the concept behind EnduroSat. Can we design spacecraft in a way, a satellite in a way that it's really easy to use and integratable with any type of sensors, and put those sensors in orbit so that they can generate as soon as possible valuable data that basically impacts positively industries on the ground. So when I say space is closer than I think, this is kind of a mentality, I would say, that we have in the company and with the educational program, that whatever we do on daily basis, we hope somehow objectively translates into the notion that what I'm doing right now in my mundane daily tasks, in my developments, in my amazing exploration initiatives, in my education, should in principle lead us to a future where space is really more accessible and universally affordable for many and not just few.
Awesome. There are two facts here that really amaze me. The first one is the fact that you have a degree in history, not in engineering, space engineering, or even like IT type software development. And the second one is that you've created the program and the company without any governmental support or any funding. So when I was getting myself prepared, I've heard you talking about the value of entrepreneurship in basically the relentless pursuit of opportunity disregarding the currently available resources that you basically had not much of, and went in 11 years time from creating a organization to creating a business within. Huge impact. So why is being entrepreneurial important? I would probably put it on my forehead for people to see why is it important to be an entrepreneur in your life.
I think being entrepreneurial is a mindset rather than necessarily you having to create your own company. And I think you can be entrepreneurial in any environment and in any shape or form and context that you live in, as long as you have the capability to really objectively impact the lives of others in a positive way, either be by creation of an interesting product or a service, improve something existing, or do some paradigm change in a way that you see fit, and basically have the audacity, I would say, to shape the world around you, whether small or big one, in a way that you want it to be, as long as it's inclined towards improving others' life and bringing real value. Because I tend to believe that a lot of startups got a little bit confused over time, that hyping and over-promising is more important than you actually objectively sitting, drawing the line at the end of the day and seeing through the efforts that I've done today, through the product or the service that I have created, am I objectively improving life conditions and the world around me in the way that I wish to? Or am I a little bit self-delusioning myself about the impact that I'm actually making?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of a book called Atlas Shrugged that pinpoints the importance of being entrepreneurial in the world. The second thing is, you said that you've always been amazed by space and wanted to create a spacecraft, but nevertheless, you chose history. Why did you choose history?
Because there are two things that I love a lot and dearly. One was the idea of trying to understand our civilization and what went so wrong in the years before me, and
not to make the mistakes again.
And then space, and of course, because in Bulgaria at the time that I wanted to create these spacecraft engineering initiatives, it was absolutely impossible from a point of view. There is no relevant education whatsoever to permit you to do that on a general sense. I decided to pursue my other passion, which was history and cultural anthropology, and Sofia University had a fantastic, hopefully still have a fantastic degree in history. And I was amazed because at the moment I started studying history, all my friends was like, you're crazy. What can you do? What can you work after you graduate, as a historian? To them, degree in history sounded like doomsday, basically, something that you cannot leverage or do anything with. And actually, because I have a strong interest in industrial revolution, the creation of the modern businesses, a lot of the things that I've experienced, even in EnduroSat, as we are growing so fast, the company is scaling to different sizes and complexities of the business, relate very closely to events that have happened in different industries as they were growing and becoming relevant in their regions, in different parts of the world, through history. So I would say history actually helped me immensely, even on a daily basis, sometimes to explain to myself this social experiment that we created as a company, and to be able to try to navigate more efficiently the direction and the speed at which we want to develop it further in the future.
Yeah, there's this Henry Ford quote: "If I have asked the people what do they want, they would have said faster horses." Yeah. So I can imagine that something like this. What was the resource that basically you utilized to create EnduroSat? Was it like the people and their brains, or was it the idea was so good, or what actually is the foundation of EnduroSat?
I think the foundation of EnduroSat was our drive that we really want to build spacecraft, and we believe that spacecraft should become at a certain point a commodity technology. If you think about the smartphone, is insanely complex system of hardware architecture on a cutting edge technology, incredible manufacturing challenge, insane amount of software, including smart algorithms, so machine learning algorithms. But when you use it as an end user, this entire complexity and difficult even to grasp supply chain is not transferred to the customer, to the user, to the consumer. So if we could do our job well, so that we push the satellites in the same direction, where the satellite, of course, is an incredibly sophisticated system. It requires insane amount of engineering, and it implies a huge amount of risk in development. The supply chain of building something on a hardware level is excruciatingly painful, and it becomes more and more apparent that actually making sure that the production lines are working well and uninterrupted, even on a smaller scale that we operate, is sometimes even more challenging than the creation of the technology itself. But then all those complexities, I believe, we should not transfer to the end user, because the sole purpose of you launching anything in space as a spacecraft is because this spacecraft is carrying some kind of sensors, and through the data that those sensors aggregate, basically you hope to discover something, or you hope to impact, to get an information vital for impacting positively industries on the ground. So in a nutshell, if you think about the satellite, it's like a transport vehicle. And we really saw no objective reasoning why the satellite should remain very complex, tailor-made system, because it's like building Rolls-Royces. It's nice, but not everyone could afford Rolls-Royce as a car. So the same goes with the satellite, even with a bigger cost, at bigger cost and a bigger complexity. So if we could potentially eliminate the entire complexity and the cost of the system, and help customers really focus on their mission, really focus almost the entire resource they have on the precision of their sensor, on the operations, and not on the legal and the complexity of the supply chain that the satellite mission implies. It's a huge step forward, because imagine a small team of 10 people suddenly could afford to fly their camera in orbit, to have early warning fire detection, or to have extremely high precision meteorology, or to generate data that is vital for the energy sector, or data that is vital for preservation agencies that are trying to stop deforestations and to monitor environment so that less people die from stupid preventable causes on the ground. All those things could become incredibly more efficient if there is a way that we put in orbit much more sensors faster. And if those users of those owners of the sensors, those users of the data that the sensors are generating, are not thinking and caring at all about the complexity of the satellite supply chain in the process. And supply chain, a satellite, just to give you the context, is you have to build your own satellite from multiple vendors. You have to integrate your own payload, meaning that you have to have a really well-positioned teams, not of historians, but of aerospace engineers in the process, and system engineers and mission operators. You have to have a really good knowledge about all the licensing and complexity of the sector in terms of legalities. So registering the frequencies for the flight, registering the space flight, exports, imports, all those things. And then if you are happy, in 2-3 years, launch one-off satellite built from scratch without any heritage of your own team, hoping that the sensor would work out well, generate the data, which, by the way, to receive the data, you have to have your own ground stations and antennas on the ground and your own mission control by that time. And only then this data gets received and potentially having the opportunity to impact someone's life with this data. So instead of that, we decided early on why it's so complex, like why people keep doing one-off satellite missions, one-off designs, why we think about the satellite technology as a very fundamentally, I would say, hardware-centric industry, where whatever you build and sits on the launch pad is what is to be expected as performance in orbit, and you cannot change it, you cannot modify it, you cannot do anything. So we decided, okay, first part of elimination of complexity, make the satellite capable of carrying different sensors without having to modify the hardware of the satellite, right? Sounds interesting. And also excruciatingly painful, as we learned as we are designing this first generation of our software-defined satellites. And how did we, this is how we came up with the idea that we call, in our terminology, the software-defined satellite. Spacecraft capable of changing dramatically the performance of power, communication, and processing on demand, even in orbit. Capability to upgrade the performance and the efficiency of the spacecraft as it is already in flight, in orbit, not on the ground. So this gives us the capability not only to be able to put sensors of different kinds on the same satellite, sharing the space of the satellite, which by the way results in a much cleaner space environment, because least amount of satellites in orbit means tremendously more opportunities for people to coexist without being worried about polluting all the orbits all the time. And on the other side, orders of magnitude more affordable space program for everyone who wants to fly the sensor, because overnight these incredible engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs, they don't have to worry about the entire who is going to build my satellite, who is going to launch it, who is going to operate them, but rather put all their efforts into the sensor, which is the generator of auctionable value in the mission. So the satellite part was the first step that we did. Then we figured out, well, we should stop with the idea that everyone builds their own ground stations and their own mission controls in principle, because it makes no sense, especially for the smaller scale spacecraft that we are building. So the way that we approach it is we digitalize the entire mission control. It's operating directly via the cloud. And in an instant, it notifies the operator, wherever the operator is, maybe it's even in vacation, that there is some discrepancy or some action that should be taken immediately. So instead of this guy having to personally sit in front of the screen 24/7 looking and nothing happens, and then he's so tired that at the moment that something happens, actually he's already too anxious to be able to solve the problem easily. Now notification comes to warn him about any discrepancy into the telemetry. So then you don't need any more mission operations and control for your sensor, right? And then if it's a digitalized mission control, meaning that you can expand and use already existing hardware of antennas on the ground, so you don't have to build and rent antennas, because through the digital mission control, our service is expandable to many ground stations on the ground in the entire globe. So those actions we have taken into account year after year to keep eliminating and digitalizing and simplifying basically parts of the satellite infrastructure, so that we can basically afford to offer space as a real alternative to more entrepreneurs to test out their hypotheses and their business plans in a safer way, because we operate the satellites and we deliver the satellites to orbit, and we give you full access to your sensors, but without you being worried about the satellites, the supply chain, the operations, and the liabilities, which in our sectors are quite substantial part of the game.
Wow, I would expect this pitch to be coming out of the Silicon Valley, or I don't know, China or something like this, or Japan. It's like some tech giant somewhere, but it's coming from like a small Bulgaria here in the local Southeastern Europe community, which is amazing. Like, nothing is impossible. It seems like so.
Well, it's we still have a long way to go, to be honest, but we're really happy that for just a few years we're already flying successfully multiple missions and multiple different hardwares in orbit with our customers. We learn on daily basis how to improve, and we are not perfect by no means. We do our fair shares of mistakes, but as long as this concept of getting space closer is really existing on objective level in our activities on daily basis, we see dramatic progress year after year. And in just 6.5 years, we managed to get to a point where we go to another space entrepreneur and tell him, give us what you want to fly. And in 6 months, you are operating your data from the cloud directly.
Amazing.
And I think this makes space more affordable, more exciting, because it means it provides equal opportunity for many more entrepreneurs to test their own ideas in orbit. And at the end of the day, again, the satellite is just the transport vehicle. So imagine EnduroSat like infrastructure builder, basically, enabler of the true innovators in orbit to get there faster, iterate on their technology in a safer environment, preserving the common orbit, and then put maximum amount of efforts on their own to impact industries on the ground and human life conditions to improve, instead of bearing 90% of their time and effort and capital into reinventing the wheel in terms of satellite supply chain in the process.
Yeah. A tremendous cost savings, I would say.
Yeah.
Awesome. One of the first, I believe the first satellite was part of the SpaceX launch.
No, the first one got launched with Orbito 80K, another very big rocket provider, and actually got deployed from the International Space Station in 2018. And
how do you feel when this happened?
Good, I think. To be honest, we were not so stressed because we were so burned out already to build the spacecraft, and we suffered so much to get it to this point. And what people don't realize is that just to get to the point of being launched in the rocket, you have to have already built the spacecraft, certified it for flight, verified in a space qualified laboratories, made all the documentation necessarily and all the licensing. So basically the launch is probably the moment that everyone finally before launch has time to sleep.
How did you personally make others believe in this spectacularly brave idea? Like out of Bulgaria to build a nanosatellite that's with all the complexities that you just described, and then with the point of democratizing access to space.
The first people who joined the space company came via very well connected or studying as part of our own educational program. So I believe I didn't have to convince them too much because they were more crazy about space than I was probably. So running 6.5 years Space Challenges program was extremely difficult for me on personal level to sustain the program because we never used resources from government or other programs. And now I'm happy that I found partners as we went through the year after year running the education. But meeting the people that came to study in the educational program was a profound had a profound positive impact on myself because I saw people that are so much smarter than myself, technically savvy, and really dreaming about space and having this passion about space in general, as strong as I had it. So it was relatively easy. We just gathered literally one night after the program. We gathered in an incredible first office of 35 square meter attic apartment in the center of Sofia. And I told them, listen, I think we now can try to build our own spacecraft. What do you think about it? And the overwhelming answer was, yeah, let's do it. And they quit their jobs and joined the company. So this was it was yet another boost of confidence for me as I went to ask investors to support in the region, which didn't turn out exactly as I planned it in the first few times.
Yeah, you got rejected quite a few times, but how many times do you remember, or even like rough estimate of this can't happen?
To be honest, I don't. I tried to account them. I got to almost 40 different conversations, but no, but it was crazy because I was so naive. I thought it's so crystal clear what we are building and how we're going to change the industry, and it's so crystal clear that we're going to really make space more accessible for others, that we're going to create also enormous amount of opportunity for the business to grow. And then I had in my mind, before going to the meetings with the first investors, this naive idea that I would have a different type of problem, that so many people would like to invest in us that I will have to turn down a few of them and they will probably get pissed off of me. So this is how delusional I was when I started to go out on investment roadshow at the time. I didn't know even what roadshow. I just went from an investor to investor. And then I got a cold shower of having about 40 no's, but and also I still could not grasp the difference between my own expectation and what I was observing to happen as I spoke with investors. So it was really funny some nights when I go home and I think maybe this guy didn't actually understand what I taught him. Maybe I have to go back again because at certain point I start playing mental game where if he says no, maybe it's a mild yes. If he says I have to get the guy to tell me hell no to make sure, okay, this is a no-go, and then I go to the next guy.
Oh boy!
So this
you were persistent, I must say.
No, I think it was very good learning curve for me as well.
Yeah,
and I think it was also difficult because at that time in Bulgaria there was not enough professional funds and professional investments done. When we started 6.5 years ago, there were some funds, but they were in their first stages. They were themselves learning how to approach startups, how to measure potential probability of success of a startup, etc. Now it's, I think our ecosystem is improving quite dramatically for good. So people change all the time.
Yeah, it's a very interesting story how you met the first investors in the company. You, without even like speaking to them, they just said, if I would have not built a software company, I would have built something in space.
Yeah, it's true. It's after maybe 40 something no's, and being very depressed already and very anxious because we were earning out of the poor cash that I could have gathered by myself very quickly, even though we were just 5 people in the company. I sit on a table with a guy whose first line of thought was exactly like this: it's my dream to do something in space. If I was not working on a software, I'm definitely going to pursue a space career and space investments. And at the beginning, because of so many no's, I thought that I received from previous investors, I thought that this guy is joking and probably some of my friends are pranking me. So literally it took me about 5-6 minutes to inquisitively ask several follow-up questions to make sure for myself personally that he's not joking.
Yeah.
So it was incredible. And then just 2 days later, we got our first 2 angel investors on board, and it was amazing because basically with their help, we managed to survive and to push forward to scale the team and operations. And it was crazy times.
Yeah, universe has its ways.
Yeah, no, of course. Then we were pressed to the wall yet again. And my first investors asked me, "Hey, go talk to a friend of ours to see how he reacts." And 2 days later, the other 2 angel investors came on board with the same leap of faith, which I could not believe seriously, because it's even now that I'm telling this story, and it's the real story how the EnduroSat got created. It was coincidence of it was many coincidental things happening one after the other, helping the company to survive and to grow further. And more than anything else was the leap of faith of a few extremely successful, I would say, local entrepreneurs. And this says a lot, because EnduroSat would have never existed if there were just funds at the beginning, because funds did not believe in EnduroSat. But EnduroSat exists because of successful entrepreneurs who built incredible companies and technologies in Bulgaria, and who knew what is behind and what it takes to build a really complex business. And their trust and confidence made EnduroSat what is today.
Maybe someone told them that the things that they have in mind and their dreams cannot happen.
I've never bothered to ask them, to be honest, exactly the reasoning why they invested. Because at the time, for me, it was much more important that they say yes and they went forward with the investment itself. So I was like, okay, let's keep it to the point. Let's keep it simple, and let me focus on keep building this satellite technology that I genuinely believed, and I now see how our technology impacts globally quite a few players in the space industry. But at the time, I wanted just to focus on designing this system and to make sure that the system really impacts positively customers and players in orbit.
All right. This was touching, really. How would you describe your leadership style? I mean, did you have any entrepreneurial experience prior to creating EnduroSat?
My leadership, before EnduroSat, I've never created successful businesses, let's say, by myself. I've participated and managed several different programs, working in bigger companies or via the educational program, because 6 years before EnduroSat, I created Space Challenges program, and the team of Space Challenges at a certain point grew to 12 people. So this was my very limited knowledge of how to run a whole organization. My management style, if I have to describe it, is for sure wrong, probably, in many cases. And I really prefer and like to be very hands-on on everything that happens in the company. And this is something that I'm currently battling, because now we are scaling at a stage that, of course, I work with people who are tremendously smarter than myself. And now I'm learning and teaching myself, basically, I'm teaching myself how to delegate more and how to be more trusty to the people around.
Yeah. Micromanaging is sometimes really not helping. Like most of the time, it's not helping.
Yeah, but in our case, it's very the very complexity of what we are trying to build requires us to have a really good understanding of every single element of the business, because every mistake on every level is a mission failure with us. It's not like you're running a software company, without demeaning the software companies, of course, but it's not like running a software company. Every mistake could lead to a mission failure. Every wrong decision could leave the company in a very bad shape while the company is scaling. So whether you like it or not, you have to be very vested into what's happening on every conceivable level. But the trade-off is that you have to learn how to delegate and how to trust the team around you. And currently we have an incredible team. I'm very proud. For example, our CTO also came from Space Challenges program. Majority of the people who are today decision makers in the company came from Space Challenges program. So here's a context how education actually matters at certain point in the game. The problem is the duration in which you have to, the timeline that it takes for an educational program to prove its worthiness. It's too long for more short-sighted businesses and short-sighted thinking to believe in education as important as it is.
How short-sighted precisely are these people?
Usually very. I mean, the context of the average business in our region is that I believe that we are very short-sighted. We think about next month, next 3 months, maximum 1 year. If you go genuinely to a business in the region and tell him, I'm thinking about 15 years from now what we want to do, or 50 years from now, he'll think first that you are either a bit crazy or a bit bullshitting, because why would you even bother to make the exercise mentally to try to foresee the future so that you project the steps that you make this future happen at the end. And I think this is changing. I'm positively optimistic about our environment, but it's still a big problem. People are really afraid to look out more further than their own feet, basically.
Yeah. Sell them Jeff Bezos' first letter then. You know, the letter that he wrote, the first letter to the people in Amazon.
No, I don't.
Started in a garage. It's all about the long game.
Yeah.
It's more to it than this, but more or less it's all about the long game. So,
but this goes also for the business. I mean,
of course,
this expectation that you become an insanely successful business overnight, I think it has its profound negative impact on the way that young entrepreneurs think about their businesses. Because business in a pure form and shape, I believe, should bring tremendous value that you can objectively evaluate as a consumer, as a market, either through a product or through a service. And you cannot build an incredible service or an incredible product overnight. You cannot, it's impossible. Even if you gather the smartest people in your segment of the market to work together, they'll still need time to design, engineer, build, deploy, and maintain and support this technology or this service. And I think it's very frightening sometimes when people only focus on the potential short-term game instead of being genuinely interested of the potential incredible impact that their effort could do long term, and this short term thinking reflecting on the teams that you are working with. A lot of teams they almost consider that if they don't become millionaires overnight, that this is not a business that matters, that this is meaningless effort, and that you should search very fast to the new or the next overhyped company. And I think markets would adjust those things very soon, and people would start to look much more strategically towards businesses who are really impactful and growing because of the value that they bring. Because if you have a business that grows thanks to the value that you are actually building and not thanks to the hype, the chances are that your business long term could grow and become a force to be reckoned with in the industry and become deeply impactful in a way that you wanted it as an architect of this idea.
I can hear the historian speaking here. It's amazing to have this perspective as a business, as a CEO of a company. So thank you for that. You're basically saying that more or less people are glorifying money instead of the product and the impact that it is having. What has been your strategy to attract the right investors to scale EnduroSat? Because it seems to me that people that are in it to get a short-term gain are not, probably you're not interested in such investors as well.
I think having capacity to bring great investors on board is a quality. I think it's a success of your business for sure if you do very big rounds of investments, attracting big investors, because this means that you are really good in presenting your vision and selling it and convincing people who might help you to actually build a sensible business. But I'm more certain that the capital is a part of the resource that you need to actually build the product or the service of a value. And in this case, every time that we had negotiations at EnduroSat thus far, we are always looking at, and I always ask genuinely simple and very traditional questions of, I'm trying to understand from a personal point of view how the investor would really look into the company 3 to 5 years ahead of us. How would he potentially react when we have hard moments? Because every company has hard moments and you need your partners to be strong when the hard moments hit, not when everything is with flying hours and you're like a rocket ship in terms of business. Not always you have the luxury to be arrogant enough to, or so good salesman, so that you have the greatest, best investors on the planet lined up to beg you to get to at your door from one side. From the other side, you have to be very careful how you choose partners. Over the years, building EnduroSat, we had conversations with fantastic people and fantastic organizations, and I think the fact that we didn't necessarily started to work with them on an investor company point of view does not demean their efforts in other fields to be successful. But I had a good feeling that the investor and your partners are people with whom you technically are like getting married, you know. You have to be certain that the chemistry, even on personal level, would be sufficient enough to coexist exactly when the tough moments come. And we were very careful building the company with the resources that we had, how to navigate and how to choose the proper partners. And for 6.5 years, I'm really proud that all our partners, as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure they didn't, never betrayed the trust, and they were always there when we needed them. And we had moments where we had to sit in the early years of the company and ask them for loans on top of already spent money that they gave to the company, just to get to the next stage, just to get to the market, just to get to the first launch opportunity. And they were always there exactly in these tough moments. And I think now they don't, hopefully, regret that they're on board. But the point is that they were there exactly when we needed them to be. Yeah. And I strongly advise founders to find the proper fit, not to focus on the amount of money that someone could give you, because with the money comes a contract, and a contract could damage your capability to make the impact and to focus on the really meaningful job that you have to do as a founder and entrepreneur to build the product and the service.
Spectacular advice. Thank you very much. How quickly did you manage to do the first sale? I mean, selling like easy access to space, low orbit.
We started actually in a different way. The vision of getting space closer to people evolved as we evolved with the company. So at the beginning, we thought that by making sure that the satellites could be built in a different way, in a more standardized way, and it could be more user-friendly for our customers, we started by providing avionics systems for satellites on the already existing nanosatellite market. Then we grew our capability to the point to be able to build in-house an entire satellite. So we started offering the satellite as a service. Then we grew with the self-esteem of operations in orbit, seeing quite a few of our customers flying successfully with our systems, knowing that they are getting more and more flight heritage, which is the most important part to prove your technology in orbit in operations. That we say, hey, why don't we even go further and try to check other parts of our supply chain and in the context of mission operations that we could eliminate as a complexity from our customers' point of view. So we built our own ground stations. Then we saw how excruciatingly painful it is to build a ground station, especially for tracking low Earth orbits objects and satellites. The licensing, the construction, the amount of time that you have to take into account, the amortization of this equipment over time, the complexity of working remotely with these antennas. The costs that come with you paying a teleport, basically a place that safeguards those antennas to operate in a proper manner. And all of those things started to pop up new ideas of, oh, you know what? If we digitalize the mission control and make it extendable to any type of antenna on the ground that we need, makes no sense that we have to build any more excruciatingly difficult infrastructures on the ground. Then, oh, you know what? If we make this a little bit smarter, the mission control operations, the software itself could immediately notify the operator when he has to see something on the screen and not for him to sit in front of the screen all the time. So every step of the way that we made the development of the company, we learned and we analyzed what could be the next step. And in the days that we had our first software-defined satellite, we said, well, instead of just providing it on the market as a hardware, as a flight hardware that someone can fly, put their sensor and fly, why don't we offer this as a service? We have the mission control, we have the capability to operate, we have the satellite. So suddenly we turn the entire proposition into just give us what you want to fly, and in 6 months you receive the data in the cloud. And I think this could make space authentically more easier for the next generation of entrepreneurs. I'm really excited. We're focused on commercial missions for Earth observation, high precision meteorology, remote sensing, and IoT. And I think each one of those segments could dramatically improve, in objective terms, life on planet Earth in different regions or on more global level, and on businesses in that matter. So we are now focused on that. And as we go, as an infrastructure builder in orbit, because EnduroSat at the end is kind of an infrastructure builder organically, we are ensuring that your sensors get to orbit safely and you transfer the data to the cloud. That's it. We will probably evolve the vision even further in the near future, and we're already working on something that I think could be the next game changer of the entire industry. But I hope that we can brag about it in about a year and a half from now.
We keeping my fingers crossed. Yeah. EnduroSat, space logistics, then easy.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Amazing. So next question. You can see the economic opportunities that technologies such as yours is providing. And what does this mean for countries like Bulgaria? Like, can it somehow help the local ecosystem, the companies around?
I think it's a complex question. I think with Space Challenges and EnduroSat, we are in somehow building an entire industry and capability in a region that did not have a competitive space program for a long, long time. I strongly believe that in our region, we should have a strategic capability to build technologies vital for the future of the development of our society, and space technology is absolutely, without doubt, one of those technologies and areas. And I think if our country is more interested into the future, middle, short, and long future of development of us as a society, we really need to take tremendous steps in enabling this industry to start growing and to thrive. To give you a few ideas, even with our own current capabilities, today we could offer amazing opportunity for high precision meteorology, Earth observation relevant to landslides, water depositories, deforestation problems, monitoring of seasides, and those capabilities, we have them today to be built in the Balkans, by very smart groups of engineers working on a daily basis to offer similar solutions on global level. And for me, a little bit disappointingly, I still have the feeling that because we have tremendous other problems and we say, well, we don't have to think about the future and the relevancy of our technology capability until we don't solve the other big issues, like healthcare is a huge issue, of course, in our region. Transportation infrastructures are big issues. But space infrastructure is already as vital as a general infrastructure on the ground. And I really wish in the coming years to see firm decision making in enabling companies like ours to deploy and deliver infrastructure that would put the Balkans again in the maps of the biggest innovators in one of the most rapidly growing industries on the planet, ensuring that we are actual active and competitive player on the global markets with the self-esteem of us being creators of innovations, with the self-esteem that we are, in a nutshell, creating high-end services and solutions for the market, and not always presuming that eastern part of European Union is always perceived as an attractive area of development for cheaper labor force. I strongly believe that we have to push efforts into businesses and strategic who are building strategic capability. Isn't it strategic capability for Bulgaria, for example, to have its own unique private space ecosystem? Isn't it strategically incredible if we have high precision meteorology and Earth observation based on our own systems? And if by doing them we are creating jobs and opportunities for hundreds, if not thousands of young people to stay here, remain here and become competitive on global market, I think the investment that a country could do in companies and in the ecosystem of such kind are so negligible that in few years we could see dramatic shift for good and creation of entire industries. And I hope that that on governmental or administration level, people start thinking more realistically about how fast technology moves lately, because not having competitive access to space infrastructure, being confined to being reliable on others' infrastructures in orbit for your own goods and services and policies are, of course, making your case as a contributor to the common European space program very weak. Strategically are weakening the position of the country and are depriving otherwise tremendous potential future workforce of creative and organically grown engineering and science talents to leave the region to go for other regions who are better positioned to offer them similar or better opportunities for development.
Awesome. Yeah. Hopefully someone is listening to our podcast today, because I firmly believe that this is the proper way forward, to be innovating and not to be waiting for others to do it first. So given the global trends of consolidation between space startups and SPAs merging with space companies to meet the demand for fast go-to-market and raising money through IPOs, what kind of future do you envision for EnduroSat?
We have our own roadmap. We are looking into how the public markets are reacting more optimistically towards space companies going public much earlier than when they are actually already running as a sustainable business. And we hope that those companies and cases are successful. But that being said, EnduroSat is a self-sustainable and profitable organization ever since we went on the market, which I'm extremely proud of. It's a very rare case in the space industry to have a sustainability and to grow so fast, maintaining sustainability. And to build this infrastructure in the near future, we want to retain the same attitudes towards how we grow and how we spend money and how we invest. So time will tell that if our strategy of more traditional scaling is good, or we had to go to the public markets immediately and to try to convince generalist investors of the value that we could create in the near future. The problem with the challenge with our industry is, again, it's so complex, so heavy, demanding on capital, so capital intensive and human resource intensive and legal intensive, that it's becoming more and more sophisticated for a small startup to exist. And in space, usually startups that are starting to think about commercially viable products and services, they need to raise tens, if not hundreds of millions just to exist, which puts the space companies in a completely different ballpark game than a software company. Software company, you start with a server, nice idea, with two laptops, a quad, and two very smart guys working together relentlessly. Space companies, you start the same, but with all the logistics that you need to secure early on, because otherwise you cannot exist. And our roadmap as a company is to try to ensure that the next ones could step on what we have already built and accelerate their growth exponentially faster towards the deployment of services at a price that makes space startups existence possible with the same amounts that a software company could exist. And if we can do that, I think we have done a fair share of positive impact on a smaller part of our industry. Giving a good example is our shared satellite service is the first fixed cost service that we know of in the market. Usually the space market is so complex and the engineering is so difficult that companies prefer to work with cost plus type of contract, meaning I can sell you this glass of water for €1, but then over the time of the usage, I don't know how much more I might charge you for any type of complexities that I might find in the way of you using the glass. And instead of that, we try to democratize the access space by providing fixed costs that are order of magnitude below what was possible 6.5 years ago when EnduroSat was in our foundation year. If you imagine that the average cost of a nanosatellite mission, if you are running the show by yourself for 5 years, and if you have to build this whole infrastructure on the ground and in space, would be several millions, however you account it, regardless how you account it. We are now offering this service for tens of thousands of euro per year, which tens of thousands of euro means a small startup in the Balkans can now afford to deploy a sensor in orbit in a safe environment without polluting orbits at a price of a middle-sized sedan, which makes space better for everyone. Because if more entrepreneurs can iterate on their ideas in orbit, of course, majority probably would fail like in every other industry. But if from 100 different projects that we enable to exist in orbit in a safe way, 10 succeed to be properly positioned to impact industries on the ground, we will basically creating overnight the next titans of satellite industry without those people having to worry about any part of a very complex satellite supply chain in the process.
Yeah, we are here at the end of our conversation, and of course the recursion comes into the context with these iterations that you're doing and taking into account that stepping on the shoulders of giants is the only way forward. So thank you, Raycho. And one of the last questions that I'm having here is, we are currently searching for the first Bulgarian startup that becomes a unicorn. What does this mean for the local ecosystem? What would it mean when it happens?
I think we should not put the race of valuations as the most meaningful way to impact good companies and good businesses. For one simple reason, in our region, we could create, and they are already existing, incredible entrepreneurs working on global markets, providing incredible solutions, and they should not have a demeanor because investor did not give them valuation of X. I think it will be incredible in the next 5 to 10 years if we see that today's businesses that we are looking into and hoping that to become unicorns actually generate billions of revenues thanks to the huge use of their services and products, because this is real impact. I think putting an entire emphasis on solo evaluation is not. I don't think it's very healthy for the ecosystem. From the other side, of course, could be a very positive signal. I was super happy, for example, when I read the news of already, I think 2 or 3 Bulgarian-born companies that are having fantastic progress in fundraising and in growing their capabilities, and I wish them all the best, and hopefully they become the unicorns of the Balkans. I think having bigger investments and more well-recognized investors in our region would inevitably help the ecosystem as a general, but at the same time focusing on valuations instead of as the only way that you measure impact is very false, very, very false, for 2 reasons. People of the next generation would look at us and our examples and decide how they approach the business. And if they approach the business in a way that for me, the most valuable metric in my company is the valuation, and I don't care about the product or the service as long as I'm in the news for how much money someone gave me, I think could backfire really fast into the ecosystem. So from one side, absolutely amazing to have enormous rounds and to hopefully prove that those rounds led to the creation of incredible value. From the other side, for the startups that are just starting now, I would urge them think about how can you scale the idea to become $1 billion revenue program, because it helps you mentally to think at scale, but focus on the product and the service. Don't focus on the valuation. Awesome. Valuations are only one of the many metrics that evaluate the real impact of a business.
Spectacular answer. Thank you so much, Raycho. And of course, our last question for the interview today would be, what would you like to be remembered for?
I'm working on it.
Wonderful. Wish you and your colleagues in EnduroSat loads and loads of successful launches and customers and all the best, but most of all, keep up the great personal example that you're giving. I hope that the new generation will be looking at your success and say, hey, this guy came out of Bulgaria, created this company. I want to create something in space. So
hopefully we can offer them the easy access for them to make a much, much larger and bigger impact for companies than EnduroSat in the near future.
Yeah, let's hope for this to happen. Thank you for being with the Recursive podcast with us yet again, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Tune in next week for the Recursive podcast. Georgi talks to the head of product management at Pop Galaxy, Maria Rashkovska.
Yeah, I think I've read statistics previously, and I've heard feedback from investors as well that in Bulgaria, most of the expertise is B2B, which is very surprising to them because, especially in the Silicon Valley, there is a lot more B2C startups. And I think there is an explanation for that. It's because, in Bulgaria, the market is very small. You wouldn't be able to have a very scalable thing if you focus only on the Bulgarian market through a B2C. So this is one thing that comes to my mind, which is they actually, investors which I talked about it, they actually find it to be a good thing, because apparently in other markets this is not the case. So maybe we should be using that expertise and focus on such ideas. And I think the hottest startups currently in Bulgaria are doing exactly just that.
Yeah.
And if you are just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.